During World War II, the network of concentration camps and forced labor camps became the darkest testament to human cruelty. Millions of men, women, and children were confined in these places, stripped of their humanity, and subjected to conditions that defy comprehension. The camps were designed not just for imprisonment, but for systematic dehumanization, starvation, and extermination. Every day in these camps was a fight for survival against hunger, disease, brutality, and fear. The entrances to the camps often bore innocuous signs, yet inside, a nightmare unfolded. Prisoners were separated by gender, age, and ability to work. Families were torn apart within hours, sometimes minutes, of arrival. Children were often separated from their mothers, sent to facilities where survival was almost impossible. Eyewitness accounts describe the cries of children echoing through the barbed wire fences, cries that were met with cold indifference or cruel laughter from guards. Forced labor was relentless. Prisoners were made to work from sunrise to sunset in harsh conditions, often outdoors in extreme weather. Snow, rain, heat, none of it mattered. Tasks were designed to exhaust, humiliate, and punish. Women carried heavy loads while sick or pregnant, men were forced into backbreaking construction or industrial work, and anyone who faltered faced beatings, public humiliation, or execution. Guards wielded whips, rifles, and blunt instruments to enforce obedience, deriving pleasure from inflicting pain. Hygiene was virtually non-existent. Latrines were overcrowded and filthy, water was scarce, and diseases like typhus, dysentery, and cholera spread like wildfire. Medical care was minimal and often lethal. Doctors sometimes conducted cruel experiments under the guise of science, exposing prisoners to disease, starvation, or extreme conditions. Even those deemed fit for labor were often too weak to survive more than a few weeks under such conditions. Starvation was a daily reality. Meals were meager, often nothing more than watery soup and a slice of bread. Hunger drove people to desperation. Stories emerge of prisoners scavenging for scraps, risking punishment or death to find a morsel of food. Some resorted to cannibalism in extreme cases, though such acts were driven purely by the will to survive. The relentless hunger broke spirits and bodies alike, leaving survivors permanently scarred both physically and mentally. Executions were frequent and arbitrary. Prisoners were shot for minor infractions, sometimes in public to instill terror in others. Some were hanged, burned, or worked to death. Mass executions occurred regularly, especially in extermination camps. Trains delivered thousands of new prisoners who were immediately sent to gas chambers or shot in mass graves. Eyewitnesses described the screams of those condemned, the cries echoing across the grounds, a haunting soundtrack to a living nightmare. The psychological torment was perhaps the most insidious. Prisoners lived in constant fear, never knowing when they might be called to labor, beaten, or executed. The constant presence of armed guards, the cruelty of fellow inmates coerced into collaboration, and the omnipresence of death created a pervasive atmosphere of despair. People were forced to betray friends or family to survive, a moral agony that haunted them long after liberation. Children and the elderly were particularly vulnerable. Those too young or too old to work were often sent immediately to death. Stories of mothers being forced to watch their children killed, or of elderly prisoners being executed for weakness, are common. Survivors speak of the horror of standing in line as selections were made, knowing that a single glance from a guard could seal a loved one's fate. Escape was nearly impossible. Barbed wire, watchtowers, armed guards, and minefields surrounded the camps. Attempting to flee almost guaranteed death, yet some risked it anyway, driven by sheer desperation. Stories of escapees tell of months spent in hiding, hunted relentlessly, enduring starvation and exposure while evading recapture. The few who succeeded became living witnesses, carrying stories of horror that would otherwise have been lost. The scale of death is staggering. Millions perished in camps across Europe, victims of systematic starvation, forced labor, disease, and execution. The dead were often buried in mass graves or burned in crematoria, sometimes before their families even knew they had arrived. The remains of entire communities were reduced to ash, a cruel erasure of identity and humanity. Survivors recount daily atrocities. Women faced sexual violence, men were forced to witness the suffering of their families, and children lived with constant terror. Personal belongings were stripped away, names replaced by numbers tattooed on skin, further erasing individuality. The brutality was both physical and symbolic, designed to crush the human spirit entirely. Despite this, acts of courage and resistance emerged. Some prisoners formed secret networks to share food, medicine, or messages. Others sabotaged production or fought back in small ways, even knowing the cost could be death. These acts of defiance, though small in scale, became a lifeline for morale, a reminder that even in the depths of horror, humanity could survive. The liberation of the camps revealed the unimaginable scale of suffering. Survivors emerged, emaciated and traumatized, bearing witness to crimes that were difficult to fully comprehend. The world saw stacks of corpses, ruins of barracks, and remnants of industrial machinery used for forced labor. The horrors were documented in photographs, diaries, and testimonies, creating an enduring record of human cruelty. The psychological scars lasted a lifetime. Many survivors struggled with post-traumatic stress, depression, and anxiety for decades. Memories of abuse, hunger, death, and despair haunted them long after the war ended. Families were rebuilt, lives attempted, but the shadow of the camps never fully lifted. The stories of these women and men serve as a stark warning about the depths of human cruelty and the resilience required to survive it. History remembers some, but countless voices remain unheard. The camps were places where identity, dignity, and life itself were stripped away. Yet, even amid the horror, small acts of kindness, solidarity, and defiance persisted. These moments of humanity shone in contrast to the darkness surrounding them, a reminder that even in the worst conditions, hope and courage can survive. The legacy of these camps is both a warning and a testament. It is a warning of the atrocities humans are capable of when ideology and power are unchecked. It is a testament to those who endured, who survived against impossible odds, and whose stories must continue to be told. Remembering these horrors ensures that future generations understand the cost of hatred, cruelty, and indifference. The camps of World War II remain among the darkest chapters in human history. They show the extremes of suffering inflicted deliberately by man upon man. They remind us that survival is not guaranteed, and that the human spirit, though often tested beyond imagination, can persist. Every testimony, every photograph, every diary recovered from these camps carries a lesson: to remember, to honor the victims, and to confront the past so that such horrors are never repeated.